Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Everything is Bad New Fangled Motion Picture Show.
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another episode of the New Fangled Motion Picture Show. I am your host, Niall.
And I'm Nolan, also host.
Host part D. Host Redux.
Host Mark II.
And
V 2.0.
Today we are here to review a movie that addresses, hey, what would it be like if one of the most popular pop/rock groups in the history of the world disappeared and you had the memory of their music to pirate it and claim it as your own?
Yeah.
Of course, we're talking about the movie Yesterday. Nolan will not be singing. I promise he cannot carry a tune in a bucket.
Doesn't stop me from singing.
I really wish it would. So, anyway, we're gonna do our normal shtick, as it were, where we do a spoiler-free review, and then give you a spoiler warning, and then go more in depth into it after that. So, shall we?
We shall.
All right. So, Yesterday, like we said, is a movie, if you haven't seen the trailers, where something happens, and the world changes, and amongst a whole bunch of things, several things anyway that we find out, the Beatles, as a band, just never happened. The Beatles themselves seem to still exist, like have been born and stuff, but they just never became a band.
Right. But this, our main character, Jack, who's a fan, he's
a struggling musician.
He's a struggling musician, and just out of nowhere he starts playing like the Beatles songs that he knows, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's amazing!" And they never heard these songs before, because, right, like we said, the Beatles didn't exist. So he starts claiming them as his own and becomes this huge sensation, playing the Beatles music
and hanging out with Ed Sheeran, that guy from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So it's, if you're a fan of Beatles music, it's an interesting way to explore the music of the Beatles.
Yeah, and also sort of a way to explore of what if the Beatles music is being produced today with today's record companies, how they operate today.
Yeah, so there's a few things in there, we'll get more into this sort of stuff in the spoiler section probably, but yeah, there's some small changes in the songs, like in
the trailer they show Hey Jude becomes Hey Dude.
Yeah, and
he doesn't want it, but the record company does.
Right. The song Help is a bit more like high speed and punk sounding, which is I actually really enjoyed that cover. I thought it was actually a really good cover of that song. So things like that.
But it's a fun. It's funny too. It's a fun little light comedy. Kind of a lighthearted jaunt, and if you're looking for someone just kind of...
Also, there's a girl involved.
Yeah, but if you're looking for someone just kind of a little pick-me-up sort of movie, then this is pretty good.
Yep. I do recommend it. It's got a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb right now, which is, I think, higher than what I saw the other day.
Yeah, I had, before we went to see it, I'd heard a lot of reviews that didn't really like it, but then the day before we went to see it, I heard a number of reviews that did. And I don't know, maybe it just has to grab the right people.
Yeah, looking at IMDb's metrics here, it's not reviewing well against people my age, but people your age, it's reviewing pretty well with, and people old enough to remember the Beatles when they were alive.
Right.
It's doing really well with, apparently.
Well, 3 of the Beatles still alive.
Well, yeah, but the Beatles as an entity.
When they were
band.
When
the band The Beatles was still alive. How's about that?
Okay. But yeah, well, I mean, when you think about it, though, like, yeah, obviously the people that were old enough to be fans when the Beatles were big, but then also people my age who are the children of those people.
Yeah.
So they grew up hearing the music too. People, when it gets down to your age, maybe didn't even really ever hear the music much.
I refuse to believe that anyone in the first world grew up without hearing the Beatles.
Well, yeah, but
often.
yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
I remember when that one album came out. It was just like out of nowhere, like, hey, just put like all the biggest hits on this album, titled it One. Like all the songs that like had been number one. There's quite a few of them.
Yeah,
that was kind of a big deal. Everyone my age bought that album, or not everyone, but a lot of people my age even bought that album.
Yeah, so I really enjoy the music, but again, like I grew up hearing that music, and it wasn't interesting to see some of the changes that happened just because the music industry as a whole has changed since the Beatles were around.
Or even like some things like Jack, the main character, doesn't necessarily remember the song,
like all the lyrics
quite right, and he's having to like kind of fill them in or whatever. I mean, some of them, like the big one, like Yesterday, or the first song that he plays is for Yesterday, and that song's really short.
Yeah,
everyone knows all the words of that, but
yeah,
I mean, there's a few he gets all the way right, and then a few he doesn't quite get right or whatever. But
well, yeah, and he's. I mean, I guess this is a very minor. I wouldn't even count it as a spoiler because it doesn't really have anything to do with the overall story. But people are questioning his choice of referring to Russia as the USSR when he sings "Back in the USSR."
Yeah,
I think it was what did they say?
You weren't even
born when it was the USSR or something like that. And yeah, to me,
there's a couple songs like Penny Lane is one of them, and then like one other. He spends basically the whole movie trying to remember the lines to those songs, like all the way through, but they're very complex, lyrically complex songs.
Yeah, they bring it up a couple times, but basically every song on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is a difficult song because they're all just so bizarre. And the lyrics make no freaking sense because they were all super stoned while they'd made that whole album and got really experimental with it. And it's all stuff that could have never performed live.
Well, there's one point someone asked him the meaning behind a song, and he's just like, I really don't know. It was his answer. He's like, I really don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, if you're even a passing fan of the Beatles, even if you're not necessarily like a fan, but you just enjoy the Beatles music, which is kind of where I'm at. I'm more of a Stones kind of guy. Not really. I think I can name you like 3 of their songs. But yeah, I mean, if you at all like the Beatles music, I do recommend you see the song, or see this movie.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yep,
I enjoyed it.
It's got that guy from Game of Thrones in it.
Yeah, that
Ed
guy
Sheeran.
from Game of Thrones.
Ed Sheeran. Why was everyone so angry when he was in Game of Thrones?
I don't know.
He had a singing part. It makes sense you would get a musician. Anyway, so spoiler warning?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I do really like I said, I like pretty much all the changes they made to the songs to make them a little more modern sounding.
Even Hey Dude.
Well, I mean, we never actually got to hear Hey Dude as a song. But someone did question him because there's these 2 other characters. So I do have one problem with this movie, actually, now that I think about it, is that they don't really explain the rules very well.
Well, they don't explain why the changes happened.
Yeah.
It's not just that the Beatles are gone. That's not the only thing. Like, Coca-Cola doesn't exist either.
Which means I hate this world.
Harry Potter doesn't exist. There's a few other things here and there. Cigarettes don't exist.
Yeah. Which I'm like, things would be so different in the world if cigarettes didn't exist. Just because certain people and governments and corporations wouldn't have the power and control that they eventually got to, and like that's a whole butterfly effect thing that they were not taking into account for this fun little music movie.
They didn't say tobacco didn't exist, just that cigarettes.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, they don't explain why that happened. It doesn't really matter. To me, it didn't really matter that much.
No, I don't really care the why, but they didn't explain the rules of like why it happened. I don't need an explanation. And if it were just this guy that remembered the Beatles, I'd probably also be fine with it. But I want to know why those two other people remembered the Beatles and no one else. Why the three of them?
Yeah,
there's
a Russian guy and a woman from Liverpool that also remember the Beatles.
Yeah,
and we find out about the Russian guy because when he's playing, Ed Sheeran after he starts after Jack starts making it big on the internet before he even has an agent or anything, Ed Sheeran picks him up to be an opening act
for the European leg of his
tour. And they go to Moscow, and he plays back in the USSR there in Moscow. But there's this one guy just standing in the crowd, dumbfounded, just staring, and it cuts back to they're cleaning up the club that they were playing. They're the guys are sweeping it up, and he's still just standing there staring, and that he knows about the Beatles. And then later when Jack goes to Liverpool to try to find some of these places that the Beatles wrote about, because
Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields and all that.
Right. So he wants to see these places, and this woman sees him going to she knows this, she sees him going to these places and stuff.
She realizes what he's doing.
Right. And so they confront him at the end of the movie, and you think oh, they're going to be mad because he's stealing the Beatles, and they're both thank you for bringing the Beatles back to this world that doesn't have them. And they're both huge fans of the Beatles. Right,
but they're not musically inclined.
Yeah, they're not musically inclined, so they couldn't do it. So, they're just relieved that somebody who is a musician is there to bring the Beatles to the world.
Right, that was an interesting twist that actually took me by surprise.
Yeah, I thought they were going to be angry with him.
Yeah,
especially because they sort of lead up because he's doing a press conference and they're in their back yelling at him, and it sounds kind of confrontational. The way they're yelling at him.
They're holding up these toy yellow submarines, and one of them shouts, "Which one was your favorite, John, Paul, George, or Ringo?"
Right, and so he leaves he calls it into his manager. She calls it into the.
Oh yeah. But yeah, and then later his roadie shows up and is like, "Hey, these guys have been waiting to see you, and they're really insistent."
Right, and so we think they're going to be confrontational, but really they're happy that somebody is.
Yeah, so that was an interesting twist that I did not anticipate.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either.
Which the reviews I saw before we went to see this movie, a lot of people were saying it was very predictable, and in some ways it was. But that specific thing took me by surprise.
Yeah,
the way that scene turned out.
And the end of the movie, part of this subplot going through this is. His manager / roadie, this woman that he's known since they were kids, is in love with him, and he's never done anything. It's obvious to everyone around him
because he's an idiot.
He's an idiot.
Because if you had Lily James interested in you, or a woman who looks like Lily James, clearly interested in you, and you did nothing about it, you're an idiot.
Over 10 years or something.
Yeah, you're dumb.
Everyone around him is people either assume that they're already a couple, or is asking him, when are you two going to get together, because she's in love with you, you idiot.
Yeah, everyone knows it.
Yeah, everyone knows it. And so when he starts getting famous and she's like, I can't, I'm just a maths teacher.
Yeah, because
she's English.
They're in England.
I can't go with you anywhere. Basically, he's suddenly out of her life, and she's like, "Look, you're moving on. This has got to end." And that's when it suddenly dawns on him that he could lose her. It's he was taking her for granted. and he has to pick between this being a rising star and being with her.
What I don't get is why he couldn't be like, look, I'm about to start making a whole bunch of cash, baby. Come live with me in LA.
He probably wasn't even thinking that way because he was like, in his mind, he's a fraud already.
Yeah.
He was having this like moral quandary the entire movie, because he's not writing these songs. He's just playing songs that someone else wrote and claiming them as his own.
Yeah, he and I would have had very different ways of handling that situation.
But anyway, at the end, it's this whole thing where he announces to the world, he comes like Ed Sheeran's having a big concert, and he comes out on stage.
Ed Sheeran doesn't have small concerts, so.
Right. Well, he's having this concert, and he comes out on stage and plays a few songs, and announces to the world that he stole the songs, but he's giving them out for free. Every one of them he's putting up online for all the world to have. And then he announced that he's in love with Ellie, the
Lily James.
Yeah, Lily James' character named Ellie. And, they end up together and all that.
And somehow the record label doesn't sue him into oblivion, because I'm sure that was a breach of some contract he signed.
Oh, probably. That reminds me, there was a joke that was kind of funny when they're trying to market his first album, and he's coming up with suggestions that are all Beatles albums, and he's just the White Album. They're like, that's problematic. Why? Like, you don't see why that would be racially insensitive or something like that?
Yeah, like that's a lot of white, man. Yeah, the White Album and
Abbey Road, and
Sgt. Pepper's
Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Yeah. Which
they didn't like any of those titles.
Probably the three most popular albums from the Beatles, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like the record label ends up going with something that really emphasizes the fact that he did these by himself. He did
it was like
writing,
one. It's like
all the performing.
It's like the title was like One Man, All Him, or something like that, or
it was
like self-titled.
It was like something and lyrics by John Malick. Or by Jack Malick, I think. It was like,
yeah, and then like the back was like...
It was music and lyrics by Jack Malick, or something like that was the name of it. Which, when they said that, I was like, that's actually a really good name for... Like, in that context of this one guy wrote and performed the music on these songs and everything, in that context, that's actually a really great name for an album.
Yeah. But, yeah, anyway, he's having this whole moral issue throughout the movie, but... He gets it taken care of and winds up with the girl.
Yep.
And he meets John Lennon.
Yeah. So
it's funny. Like the two fans that find him, give him the address of one of the band members to go talk to. Or they were never the Beatles though; they never formed the band, and so you don't know which one is going to be. But it's like a surprise to everyone that's John Lennon because no one everyone's thinking, well, John Lennon's dead. Except John Lennon would never have been killed. If he hadn't been famous.
Catcher in the Rye. Oh, what'd you say?
If he weren't famous,
oh,
he never would have been murdered. And so, without the Beatles, there's no dead John Lennon.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where he opens the door and you're like, John Lennon? Oh, wait, yeah, I guess he wouldn't have died, huh?
Yeah.
And it's like, like when you think about it for a second, it's really obvious that, yeah, of course, he would be fine. But, you're just so used to living in a world where John Lennon was killed because of Catcher in the Rye that
no, because a crazy guy who happened to read Catcher in the Rye.
Well, yeah. Anyway, yeah, we're so used to living in a world where John Lennon was shot that when you see him, it's kind of jarring almost.
Yeah.
So that was actually a really well done reveal. I think that was the other thing that I think was done well and wasn't predictable. Like,
right.
Because, we're looking at... He's not credited.
No, he's not on IMDb, and they wanted to keep that a secret.
Who was the actor you said? told me earlier.
Robert Richard Carlisle's his last name. God, is it Robert or Richard?
Richard, I think.
Yeah, you might know him as the bad guy in Aragon.
If you remember that movie at all, I could
I'm
not
sorry.
have told you who was in that movie at all. I remember that movie was
Yeah, Robert Carlyle.
it was like too much shit to cram into a movie, but they still only made it 90 minutes. So they like doubled down on it not being enough time.
Yeah, Robert Carlyle.
Robert Carlyle. Okay. But
Or you might know him from the Full Monty or Train Spotting, World Is Not Enough, Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, so that was a really good reveal, I think.
I was while we were watching, I was like, I think that I couldn't remember the actor's name, but I was like, I think I know who that actor is. But he had some prosthetics on to make him look more like John Lennon.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just the collective response of the audience when John Lennon opened that door was, huh?
Yeah. Because you just like, yeah, you're like in your world, he's dead
And been dead.
but there's no reason he would be dead if the Beatles didn't exist.
Yeah, so,
I mean, I guess there's reasons he might have, other things might have happened to him. Heart disease, who knows?
Yeah, but it wouldn't be guaranteed.
Right.
So yeah, go check out this movie if you haven't already. There's actually not a whole lot in theater right now, unless there's something you haven't seen from the past few weeks. I mean, there's Toy Story, but looking at the numbers that movie generated, I'm pretty sure everyone in America went and saw that movie last week.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there? Godzilla's still in theaters, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Men in Black.
Men in Black. So, our next movie... Let's see, coming soon. Our next movie is Spider-Man Far From Home, which that video will probably be going up in 3 days from today?
Yeah.
Today's Sunday, so probably Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Alright, and then the next movie after that is gonna be Stuber, and we should have that up at least a couple days before the widespread release of that movie. That movie looks really good, and it's got Prismo in it, and who is also the Pawnee in Men in Black 4.
Might
Men
be
in Black
International.
Let's see. You wanted to see The Art of Self-Defense, right?
Yeah, it's probably a limited release.
Yeah, we gotta look and see when that's gonna be, if it's even gonna be anywhere near us.
Yeah.
We haven't looked that far into it. Then Lion King. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which looks really, really good, and it looks really long at 159 minutes.
Yep.
Wow, that's like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Let's see, and then Hobbs and Shaw, and that pretty much rounds out the summer movie season for us. After that, it's gonna be a lot of if we see something, it's gonna be something we have maybe a passing interest in. Oh yeah, Blinded by the Lights. Yeah, we're gonna see that. Because that's another music. We've had a lot of, not necessarily biopics, but just movies about musicians in the last few months.
Yeah. And
that's another one, this time about Bruce Springsteen. So we'll definitely check that out. The Boss. Are we going to see Angel Has Fallen?
Oh, I don't know.
The answer is no. That movie looks awful.
I only saw the first one this series.
And that was really bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we got coming up. Coming up on the end of the summer movie season.
What Playmobil the movie twice because it's on there.
What weekend is Playmobil the movie releasing? Who knows? Man, when's that Ford versus Ferrari movie coming out? That looks pretty good, right?
don't know.
Rambo and Ad Astra. Those movies look good, right?
Yeah.
Abominable looks really forgettable.
Yeah.
But so yeah. If any of that sounds of interest to you, you want to hear us babble on about movies some more, because we tend to do that.
DreamWorks is done with Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon, so I have no more interest in DreamWorks movies right now.
Yeah, if any of that sounds of interest to you, though, go ahead and subscribe, I guess. But that doesn't seem to really do anything on YouTube these days. You know, I don't know. Whatever it is that gets you alerted to when we are going to be doing releasing another video. Something about a bell in there. I don't really know how it works. Yeah, that bell next to the subscribe button. Go ahead and smash that button, and I guess you'll get alerted. I don't know. Also, check out other reviews. We just posted one up for Toy Story last week, right?
Yeah.
And Shaft before that. Both pretty great movies. Check that out. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Toodles.